Welcome back to Junior ECTV. I'm Rhiannon Traill, and tonight I want to welcome Ryan Coelho. Sorry, Ryan,
no
I got it. Motivational coach and millennial engagement consultant to the show. So Ryan, you're an expert in working with millennials and trying to make millennials the best leaders that they can be. That's sort of your
exactly. And then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is helping organizations understand this new generation, which is coming in with a whole new mindset that a lot of the previous generations aren't used to. And look at technology and things like that.
Well, and employers I know are having a hard time retaining, their staff because they don't know how to deal with this new generation.
Right, and if you have outdated cultures or you're not approaching them in a certain way, you're going to lose that talent. And we're reaching a point where there's expected to be a talent war. So it's going to be we're in a very interesting time. It's an exciting time to be alive.
You're in an interesting business at an interesting time. So let's start off by talking about this. How do we define a millennial? Can you do that for our audience before we start talking?
Yeah, it's a very good question. As the factoid said, there's no real definite answer on what a millennial is. We usually use the range 1980 to 2000. Now, even that's a huge 20-year stretch, especially when you think about how much has happened in the past 20 years and how much things are advancing. But where I like to focus on is in the upper 30-year-old and maybe even 25 to 33 is probably the best range.
The ones just entering the workforce.
Just entering the workforce. And that's not to say anything against the ones younger than that, but they're the ones that are causing a lot of disruption, if you want to call it, within the workplace, and which we need to understand in a lot better way.
Okay, so now you guys are not classically defined as millennials, but you're growing up around millennials. Millennials.
We're on the cusp.
You're on the cusp. You're on the cusp for sure. You guys are more Generation Z. That's what we would call them. Generation Z, Z. Yes. Okay. So how do you guys feel about the idea of working for millennials? Because millennials get a bad rap. They're entitled, supposedly. They want what they want and they want it now. So what would that translate into if a millennial was your boss?
Well, the way I see it, I think while we aren't technically millennials, a lot of the negative language that's used surrounding millennials in terms of this entitled, obsessed with technology, all that stuff also is thrown at our generation a lot. My personal take on it is that I'm not sure if entitled is the right word, but I think this generation definitely does have a higher expectation in terms of how it wants to be treated and what it sees as an acceptable way to be dealt with. And I think what that stems from is that a lot of human history is a natural force of progress and is a lot of liberalization over time. So eventually people start saying it's not okay for me to be a slave. It's not okay for me to not have the right to vote. It's not okay for me to be assaulted in the streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's just a higher standard of human rights in a way. So I think this is a generation that's actually more awake to what is human decency and saying, no, you cannot scream at me if you're my boss.
Right.
No, you cannot make me work unreasonable hours on a 0-hour contract, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think in a sense, working for that boss could be a really positive thing.
Right.
Because if they're entitled in terms of, expecting to be treated well, I think they have to apply that to the people they're employing.
That's a huge point. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll go in on a bit of a different take. You asked a question about how I would feel working for a millennial as my boss. And I would say I would approach it as I'm working for XYZ last name, first name, last name, person. I don't know if I really consider the millennial thing to be a factor, because I'm kind of the belief that when you try and lump people together, you're almost always going to make a mistake, and knowing someone well has infinite...
Kind of dehumanizes them.
Dehumanizes them and has infinitely many advantages. And I'm no expert, but when I hear these, I'm going to call them buzzwords, social media, leadership, millennials, these words that are used so much that we've sort of become desensitized to them about the new generation. It just makes me wonder how accurate can it be if you're talking about hundreds of millions and not billions of people, which is a huge group across all kinds of different socioeconomic backgrounds, linguistic, ethnic. How accurate can you be when you lump all of these words that really don't have a lot of meaning, it seems, into this huge group?
I mean, we see this everywhere, whether it be literature, music, film, anything. It's hard to actually dictate, okay, this is a period. However, we can sort of tell that there are differences as the time go along. And something huge about being a millennial is I believe that they are the buffer zone between the old age and us right now. Something huge about the entitlement, for example. To an extent, it is sort of true, but this entitlement is something that's thrust upon them. For example, lots of millennials, they need to have a phone. they need to pay these massive student loans. So as a result, it only makes sense that they're gonna need larger starting salaries. They're going to need
That's
to
a
have
good
more
point,
stress in
too.
their system.
Yeah, and yeah, I'll let you go, Sam.
And I think like there's some people who have these negative connotations associated with millennials, but it's important to understand that millennials live in a very different time. You know, like we pay more to go to school, we pay more for housing because it's obviously the economy's changed. There's a lot of things that have changed from I guess you could say the 1970s to 80s when these millennials were born to the age that we're living in today.
Absolutely, and I think that was one big thing that the older generation kind of looks at these millennials like, what, you're still living at home with your parents?
Oh,
Like, get out. When I was your age, I was married with children, and it's just not the same world. It's a different economy, it's a different time, and jobs are scarce to come by. Good jobs are scarce to come by. And I think we can actually tie this into the education system. So if we look at the education system right now, and especially the post-secondary education system, there's been a transformation that's starting, right? We're starting to see universities realizing that we have to offer more than just a university, degree. We have to give these students experiential learning. We have to be able to connect them with actual skills that can be applied in the workforce so that they actually can come out and have marketable skills that they can get jobs. So we're seeing the transformation starting to happen in the education system, but what's happening is then the big institutions and the companies aren't prepared for the kids who are coming out and want to be entrepreneurial, but are now staunched into these very locked in, still old way of doing business. If you want to go and work for one of the big banks, things aren't going to move at the pace that you want them to move and that you've been taught that you should want them to move. So how do we deal with that crash of those two things coming together, Ryan?
Well, and what I'm really interested on that topic of education, I'd love to throw to the panel and ask you this is, I'm a big believer, like, change isn't needed, a transformation is needed. Because as much as we try to change within the education system, it's still always focused on that degree, that diploma, get this, then you move here. And I'm finding that you have a lot of young people entering the workforce thinking they have the skills that are going to do the job, not realizing that those are certain skills that will assist you, but there's so many other skills you need to develop that maybe you could have learned before that you weren't able to learn before. So I'm curious, you're all in high school, I'm guessing, yeah? Going into university and college, what's your perception of it? Because I remember when I was going into it, it was the ticket. My parents were like, get the degree,
only way. Yeah.
You will fly, you will reach heights, and I'm starting to think that I don't want to call it a lie, because that's a horrible way to say it, but a little bit of a deception is starting to be seen through. And I'm curious to know if I'm right about that.
I mean, in the end, right now, I think a lot of myself and my friend, if you have this goal for high achievement within a specific area, most people are now starting to look at it like high school. I'm thinking of it as another 4 years. I've already started looking at my LSATs. Like, this isn't something that I'm planning to finish this degree and then, okay, I'm going to go straight into the workplace, stuff like that. No, now I'm starting to feel the pressures that I need to get my education done as quickly as possible so I can actually have a life afterwards. Otherwise, I'm going to spend and I consider myself lucky. I have parents that are going to be able to assist me in paying this education. I have no idea what I would do if I didn't have that support system. And I feel absolutely terrible when I consider the fact that there are some people who feel that they're going to have to take a disadvantage at the workplace just because someone else has imposed the fact that, oh, well, now guess what? You're going to need to spend at least $50,000 for that extra $5,000 in starting salary.
Education right now,
Go ahead.
Education right now is no longer a deal maker, but it sure is a deal breaker. And that is what really grinds my gears.
You always have these little...
Because
that's actually really good.
Because mark inflation is so prominent. These people who like the number of people who fake their community service hours, all of this. I'm not saying ambition is bad, but all of these people just pouring in to try and get into these tertiary industry, high-paying jobs, are just flooding the system with so much that people have stopped doing extracurriculars, I find, because they're interested in them. They're doing them to build the resume.
To get whatever they need to.
I find that this very, very important view of the post-secondary education institution is one of these things that's cyclically normative, right? The more we do it, the more we assume that it's absolutely necessary. Do I personally think it's necessary to get that degree to become incredibly successful, whatever your perception of success is? Absolutely not. There's countless millionaires and billionaires who did not get that degree. But I think I am going to do it because it's the safer thing. And we make lots of small
side of
right.
it,
We
right?
make lots of small gambles, but I think when we're looking at our whole careers over our whole lives, an extremely volatile economy, an extremely changing world, we are not ready to make those gambles with our futures. And if we do end up, not going to university and not succeeding in our field of choice, we're going to say, why the hell did I go to university?
And just to add one more thing to that, I think it's high school is almost like your 4 years is focused on getting to that next level, which is university, and guidance touts it as being the next big thing. But the people graduating university isn't really reflective of the job market that we have right now.
No, absolutely.
We're not training people in high school for computer science and engineering because that's where there's a major shortfall in Canada, and also for the skilled trades. There's a lot of people that are going into university or college where they could go into the skilled trades and make a lot of more money there.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I think what happened, and I know in speaking with our generation, and we graduated around the same time, and I know that our generation felt like we were sold a false bill of goods because we were told that university was the be-all, end-all, and that's all that we needed to do was to go into a good school, get good grades, and that our life was going to be set for us. And then, the crash happened of 2008, and the economy went into the complete tank, and all of those kids that were coming out of school thinking that they were going to land that job and get started and start climbing a ladder, it didn't happen. And everyone was left in a situation where we were like, what were we just told? We were sold a lie, and we just paid this much money, and now we have nowhere to go, and we're stuck. We're in debt. And a lot of people were facing depression. So many of my friends who graduated it was the hardest time of their lives coming out of school and dealing with that. And so again, I think we need to get this right now. And I think some universities, I know I have a bias for Ryerson, of course, because I'm a Ryerson alum, but Ryerson gets it now. They are changing the way that they are educating. They're changing the whole university profile. So they are understanding that you can't just go and have a linear, you start from day one and then you graduate, you get your degree, bye-bye, out the door. They know that we have to continue to interface with the business community constantly, that you have to have opportunities to put your experience and your knowledge to work all the time, and that's not only going to help you as the student, but also the people that are interacting with those students to be prepared to employ them.
I think that's the whole thing. It's actually the opposite. The entitlement were in the previous generations where you thought, okay, I'll get this job, I'll work here for 30 years, and when I'm done, I'm going to retire pretty well off. However, with us now, we're sort of a brand, and we're building ourselves to look as shiny and new as possible for all of these large multinational companies or such to pick us up and hire us, just so that we now have to, most people aren't even working at the same job their whole life. They're going to be at one place, lateral movement to another place, and you're already going to be handing in your resume while you're getting your paycheck.
And you're comparing these two economies that the last generation or the baby boomers went through with ours that are totally different in terms of how it works, right? It was a very skill-based economy back then, industrial revolution, you need the skills to do the job. But now, with everyone vying for everyone else's attention, you got to get more creative, and it's not just about having the technical skills, but do you have those interpersonal skills? Do you have those mindset, those influence skills that might not come in a textbook, that might actually come from an experience? And so trying to put someone through a system that doesn't necessarily align with the system that they're going to continue to add value in, that's where it gets really interesting and scary.
And I think that baby boomers and that generation are very willing to push blame in terms of the way the economy is now, the way millennials act, and there's a lot of baby boomers saying, hey, millennials, why don't you go get a job? Well, baby boomers, why don't you retire and create some jobs? There's a direct correlation between the response to the economy that millennials put forward and the way that economy got in the first place, which is from that older
However,
generation.
to be completely fair, especially places like Japan, now you're having this thing where too many of us millennials are going into skill positions. Now when all these people retire, we're going to need to have a labor market who actively work towards, helping the rest of society.
The labor market is the skilled labor market is dying, and it's sad. It's problematic. A number of things are problematic with this change, like pensions. how are we going to pay for all this stuff? Like, we got all these people retiring and they want more, they want more. I'm not saying that they don't deserve it. I mean, I'm not trying to offend my grandparents.
Well,
but
I mean,
And I mean, let's
it's
be
a
clear,
problem.
yeah, they're calling us entitled. Those are called entitlements. Okay,
well, but they were, that was their bill of goods that they were sold, that they were supposed to work and then they would get their, you know, their gold sealed pensions and they would be okay. And that might not even be there now for them. That's also crap.
But people are living to be longer and longer. There are more and more. And it's just so flooded, the system that we have right now. It's so, it's becoming really plastic. Like, if you know what I mean, it's become, like, at the economic club, elevator pitches are taking off. Like 20 years ago, no one would have heard of an elevator pitch competition, but now it just becomes so much about that sort of face value thing. Because like Teddy said, you're handing in your resume and you're getting your paycheck. Things change so quickly.
You're the expert in navigating this world, and how do we make ourselves stand out? How do we navigate this and know that we can be noticed, be seen, because we are just flooded, inundated. Everyone's just a number almost. How do you define yourself in this crazy generation?
Well, I'd love to get your thoughts on after I kind of give my philosophy on it, but you're always going to have the organizational perspective, and I do a lot of consulting in creating the right culture, creating the right environment for millennials to strive, and that's something I work on quite a bit. But then on the millennial, looking at it from a young person perspective, I've gone through that journey where millennial engagement consultant is not a job. You can go anywhere and say, I'd like to apply to be this. I had to build that value.
You need to create it.
And more importantly, I had to look at what my skills were and what the problem was and where my passion lied. I took those three things, and you know, because you've been there from day one, where I'm like, Rhiannon, I don't know what any of this means. And I shaped it and I said, well, here's an issue. You have this young group of talent being given skills that are not necessarily relevant in making them successful. Then you also have no vocational training in terms of helping them understand where they want to go. So they're choosing things based on the economy, not realizing that there's challenges that we may not even see right now that they could add value to. Just like I started unknowingly when, I remember when I got into the game for millennial stuff, everyone's like, don't focus on them, they have no money, they're not going to spend it on you. They were right. But little did I know that organizations were going to start struggling with the millennial generation, and they turned to me because I had that experience. So understanding, you know, having that guidance that's being given to young people, I feel is missing. But if you look at it from, let's stop blaming and let's stop seeing why everyone else is at fault. From a young person perspective, I always coach and I always advise and I always, you know, really as much as I can encourage, understand that every aspect of value has to do with a challenge or a problem that needs to be solved. Get your mind out of the fact that you need certain skills to do a job. Get your mind out of the fact that you need to get this position and move up this rank. I've found what's allowed me to do well, and the people that I talk to that are very successful, is they say there's an issue there that someone's struggling with, and not in terms of a need, but in terms of pain. Someone is feeling pain. An organization's losing money because of millennials coming in and then they're leaving within 2 years, and we've spent $20,000 on onboarding and all the fees related to getting them in the first place. That's painful to an organization. Or the fact that we are about to create a succession plan, we want to retire and we don't have young people to carry on those ship,
roles in the way that we want them to.
Or even in general, because they keep jumping ship. So I saw that pain and I said, well, wait a minute, this is a great opportunity. Being a millennial, studying leadership development, understanding the mind and being, that's my passion. Now I'm able to go in and help them shift perspectives and build really solid strategies around culture.
It's so cool, and I'm so proud of you and what you've been able to build out of this, because I really remember when you didn't know what you were going to do. But I think it's amazing. No, but it's right. I want you to just quickly make a pitch for this leadership conference that's coming up that you're running, because I think it's really important for our viewers. And
so, you know, in terms of the young person, what I just mentioned, from an organization perspective, we want to invite everyone out on April 19th to the Millennial Leadership Summit. It's going to be held at Daniel Spectrum. And we're going to give people the tools and understanding of millennials and how to build them into leaders of organizations.
That's amazing. So that's April 19th, and we can go to your website and we can check
RhiannonCoelho.com or MillennialLeadershipSummit.com will take you right there. All the speakers, all the panelists, everything, and registration, of course.
That's amazing. I hope lots of people go out to that. And we are going to be right back with more on millennials in the workplace right after this break.